So now that E3 2019 is pretty much in the rearview mirror, I figure it's a good time to do my general coverage of the event. Here's the thing, I'm mostly going to speak about things that were particularly interesting to me, and I'll be ignoring all the trashy mobile games and the annualized crap that hardly changes year after year. Sadly though, that's like more than half of the convention nowadays, so just to warn everyone, this isn't a complete everything that was shown at E3 video, it's a what was cool segment that also contains a lot of my own opinion. Before jumping in, Sony actually skipped this year's conference, and if I had to speculate why that is, I would say it's probably because the new console format, PlayStation 5, is right around the corner, and that makes the current phase of games, right at the tail end of this generation, a little less important on their agenda. Also, E3 is a shit show. It's a huge hype campaign made to sucker consumers into buying things without actually knowing enough about the product. If you want proof of this, just look to Twitch, who created an extension that lets broadcasters direct their audiences to pre-order games during the convention for a slice of the profits. Essentially, as the industrial hype tornado spins at full force, Twitch has incentivized broadcasters to feed into it even further by advertising for these games and companies, even before there is any merit to their trailers, claims, and promises. Imagine if this kind of thing had existed last year and games like Fallout 76 or Anthem had been plugged by streamers even more than they already were, because they harvested a nice bump in their earnings based on the delusional hype. At its core, E3 is a double-edged sword. It's great to see new stuff, it's exciting, it's fun, but on the other side of the curtain, E3 is also a huge industrial tool that isn't always used with honesty, integrity, or consumer goodwill. That being said though, all that aside, let's get started. EA Play is first up, and there really isn't much to talk about here. I don't think it's even worth discussing about FIFA or Madden or The Sims, because those games are just clockwork nowadays, and there's basically nothing but graphical tweaks and roster changes for the sports games, or a new setting for The Sims, plus a few other gimmicks. I will also skip over Anthem because I honestly thought the developer talking about it was going to cry on camera, and while they claim that the game is going strong and has a bright future, I just flat out don't believe them, and I've completely stopped caring. Basically, the only thing I found to be worthy of discussion from EA was Jedi Fallen Order. Jedi Fallen Order was also one of the very few games at the entire convention that actually showed some fucking gameplay, and while that gameplay was not necessarily exceptional, it was at least real gameplay, and it seemed to be in a place where the game has some good potential. Personally, I'm of the mindset that the format, force powers, and general feel of the game seem a bit dated, but to be fair, it's a single-player Star Wars game with RPG elements and an emphasis on story, so I see that as an absolute win. None of it appeared to be pushing the genre forward, however, by any stretch, but it's better than another live service title from them, and I'm honestly tentatively looking forward to it. That really is it for EA though. If you think that Anthem is amazing and Star Wars sucks, fine, that's your choice, but in my eyes, EA's presence at E3 was underwhelming at best. Now we move on to Microsoft. Microsoft was an interesting press conference, and I say interesting for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, E3 2019 is the year of hardly any gameplay whatsoever. Basically, everything that was shown by most major publishers was just cinematic hype footage, and personally, I couldn't give less of a shit about cinematic marketing material. Show me gameplay, show me real, functional, playable environments with human interactions, and that's when I will start to get excited. Microsoft did hardly any of that, so it's a minus, but at the same time, they had some cool things to show, so let's get into it. First and foremost is the title that most people were probably looking forward to from E3, and that is Cyberpunk 2077. I've sat in on Cyberpunk gameplay before, an hour-long demo of it last year at the previous E3. I've already had my skepticism eased, so the fact that all they really showed this time around was cinematic trailer footage wasn't really a concern. What the trailer was really about was unveiling Keanu Reeves as a star character. It was a cool moment. I think it was a pretty good fit, and despite some pretty hilariously desperate attempts to now say that Cyberpunk is somehow xenophobic or some shit, which is entirely untrue, the game was undeniably one of the highlights for the entire convention. I will probably be covering in the near future how the social justice crowd has apparently taken aim at Cyberpunk 2077. Everything from the ads in the trailer to the factions, dialogue, and universe itself, especially the combat within that universe, have come under fire from those that aggressively tried to slam their beliefs and concerns in your face with the expectation that anything not directly conforming to their notions be changed, censored, altered, or made outright illegal, so that'll be pretty fun. Moving on though, there was also a segment for The Outer Worlds. Again though, no gameplay displayed. However, we have seen early gameplay before, so it's not like it doesn't exist. They just opted to go for the short cinematic trailer during the press conference. Outer Worlds looks cool, but then again, this little trailer did nothing to enhance or deter the level of excitement I already felt. It's a choice-based single-player RPG from Obsidian Entertainment. That's kinda all I need to know to be mildly excited. It will also be a timed Epic Store exclusive, so that's annoying, but this new trailer did nothing to affect what was already established. Additionally, there was a trailer for State of Decay 2 and its Heartlands expansion, which will effectively be adding in a real campaign of sorts. It's cool, I guess. I played State of Decay 2 when it launched, and it was clearly a game that lacked narrative and context, but adding in a story now seems a bit behind the curve. I'll probably check it out though. Moving on, we had a cinematic trailer for a game called CrossfireX, which was interesting in the sense that a highly edited piece of digital effects promotional material can be interesting, but again, no gameplay whatsoever, just a world premiere bit of hype. Then there is Borderlands 3, and though this current trailer did not include any sort of lengthy gameplay, I have heard from a couple of different friends who were patrolling the floor and actually went behind closed doors with it, that the game feels extremely polished, and in the past there has been an abundance of footage posted. So Borderlands 3 is honestly towards the upper limit in terms of what we actually know when considering upcoming releases. I will certainly be playing it, and though the game is yet another timed Epic Store exclusive, rather than a whole year or 12 months, it is 6 months, so that's something. The final three things of note from Microsoft seem to be heavy hitters. Not to say that Borderlands 3 isn't, these last three just really caught my attention. First is Elden Ring, a From Software game, the creators of Dark Souls, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and Bloodborne, which also features Game of Thrones writer George R.R. Martin as a participant working on the narrative. That gets me interested. Though, like so many other titles on this list, there was no gameplay, a Souls-esque game with a story on par with Game of Thrones and its complexity and character evolution, I think that's worth paying attention to. So Elden Ring was a game that stood out for a variety of different reasons, but should still be treated with skepticism. After that is Gears of War 5. Gears 5 is one of the very few examples of a game that also released a large section of gameplay. Personally, I've never been an avid player of the Gears series, but the previous games felt really gritty and macho, while the trailer for 5, the newest entry, really took on a sort of emo teen vibe. Maybe it's just me, but it didn't really feel all that great. The gameplay had a much more classic Gears feel to it, and like I said, it's not my area of passion or expertise, but it feels like they could have done a way better job on the cinematic stuff. Last up for Microsoft is Halo Infinite, and I have to keep this short because it was a very lengthy cinematic trailer with no gameplay. I like Halo. I think Halo Infinite is a title I will watch closely for sure, but there's nothing to talk about here. It was just, look how pretty these visuals that may not even be in the game or represent the final product are. So they teased Halo Infinite, and it's worth noting, but that's really all I can say. Now we have Bethesda. Oh, Bethesda. I'll keep it brief because I don't want to devolve into mindlessly bashing them, but this press conference was horrible. They start right out of the gate with Fallout 76, so that tells you where their head is at nowadays. They announce a trend-hopping battle royale for Fallout 76, yippee, and then they pivot to Elder Scrolls Blades, because alongside the intense lack of supporting gameplay at E3 this year, there was an overabundance of crappy mobile games as well. They did, however, have two different games that looked somewhat interesting, one much more so than the other. There was a game called Deathloop, which is whatever, I don't even really want to talk about it, and then GHOSTWIRE. GHOSTWIRE felt particularly ripe with potential, but as always, no gameplay. The concept seems to be post-event Japan, in which, much like the Avengers Infinity War Thanos snap, a large chunk of the population has simply vanished. Whatever it is, I'll keep an eye on it, but that was probably the highlight of the entire Bethesda conference. Now, before anyone jumps down my throat, yes, Doom Eternal. And yes, Doom Eternal had gameplay. And it was the largest, most emphasized chunk of their entire conference, to be sure. But in my opinion, despite the gameplay looking pretty cool, and the obvious hype in the audience, nothing was unexpected. Doom Eternal is obviously a title I will be watching and playing, but it lacked the sort of interesting angle or appeal that GHOSTWIRE had for me. All in all, Bethesda's conference can be carried by the hype over Doom Eternal, and it does look great, but I'm not really going to rave about it. It seemed pretty expected. On a side note, the same audience members at the Bethesda conference were mercilessly cheering at every single thing. I don't think I've ever heard such enthusiasm in my entire life when a marketing coordinator or whatever his job title was announced. I don't want to go all tinfoil hat right now, but at the Microsoft conference for a couple of seconds, you could actually see a screen pointing at the audience that read applause right after something was shown. So could it be that Bethesda had a bunch of staff in the crowd and they had a prompting screen like that? Honestly, I think so, yes, because no one was cheering with that enthusiasm anywhere else in the world, most likely. The press conference vibe was like not that strong. Anyways, now on to Ubisoft. Ubisoft had two things worth talking about. I guess some may disagree with me on that and they want to hype up one of the tiny little animated whatever the shits they are that they advertised, or who cares. But me personally, only two things worthwhile. First is Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs Legion has a very ambitious concept. Essentially, one can take control of NPCs in the world, and each of those characters has their own surrounding dialogue, animations, and lore. I've never really been a fan of Watch Dogs, but this is a new direction that attempts to bring something innovative to the space, and it is wildly ambitious. However, just for the laughs, there are those out there that have taken what seems to be a personal offense to Ubisoft attempting to be somewhat apolitical, seeing that as an alignment with the right. So Watch Dogs is also a title under fire for not pushing an ever-shifting set of social principles on its player base. And yes, it's still very far from release, so that's fun. The second title from Ubisoft is Ghost Recon Breakpoint. Breakpoint has had some previous glimpses released, and the game appears to have loot functions of some sort, as well as some other deviations from the standard open world format of its predecessor, Wildlands. Yet again, this is a game that has been attacked pre-release because of a bunch of garbage journalists that don't think that Ubisoft attempting to be a more neutral participant in the space is acceptable. But moving past all that, Breakpoint seems to me to be a title at least slightly worth keeping track of. Finally, we have Square Enix, and from Square Enix there are three titles I believe are worth mentioning. First and foremost is obviously Avengers. Here's the thing though, I don't like what I saw from the Avengers game. First, it's a live service. Second, it's not a close parallel to the movies. In an age where photogrammetry is a thing and some actors are being used to wonderful effect, such as in Death Stranding or Breakpoint itself, Avengers does not have that, and instead we get dated looking characters that are different from the movies, and they make it feel like a cheap knockoff, like fake Ray-Ban sunglasses. Maybe others will disagree, but I did not care at all for what I saw of Avengers. Next though, is Outriders. This is still another example of a cinematic trailer with no real gameplay and no further information, but I'm a sucker for the post-apocalyptic themes and worlds, so I put it on the list as something to be keeping track of, at least personally I will be. Last for Square Enix is the Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is where I have to say, full disclosure, Final Fantasy isn't my strong suit or my passion. But from what I saw displayed, this is a game that has been given some serious treatment, it has true potential, and also came with some wonderfully deep examples of gameplay that helped build credibility during the presentation. That's about it though. I don't cover Nintendo, even if they have given up their disgusting practice of claiming everything that creators upload. There is still some shady business with their stuff, and I know too many friends who have trouble with them across the board, or their footage because of other sources, not even Nintendo. So I just avoid them entirely. And I purposely didn't want to go super in-depth on any of these as the convention unfolded, because most creators absolutely shit out videos like a diuretic chicken during the entire conference. So that was it, my thoughts on E3. I skipped over a couple of things I do plan to cover more in depth, like Google Stadia stuff and also Destiny 2, and its monumental shift now that it's free from Activision Blizzard, but for the most part, that concludes my coverage of E3 2019. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. There are memberships, merch, stuff like that, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.